Good evening and welcome to Fridays Live with me, Raj Nayak. My guest this evening is a motivational speaker and an executive coach. He is a brand and content strategist. He is an author, but most importantly, he is the Papa of comedy, the one and only Papa CJ. Harvard Business Review described him as one of the most influential Indian stand-up comedian. And I have the pleasure this evening of having my dear friend Papa on this live chat. Papa, thank you for being on Friday's Live.
It's wonderful to be here, Raj. And for starters, please call me CJ. It would be most inappropriate for you to call me Papa.
That was my question for you. I mean, there must be a lot of people calling you Papa, right? Especially women. How do you react to that?
Raj, why do you jump in and say especially women? I mean, let me throw that back in you. Why would you phrase the question that way?
I don't feel bad calling you Papa, honestly. I mean,
Actually, there's a lot of.
I'm very young. I'm very, very young at heart.
I'm sure you are. I know you are. So, I mean, with Papa, so most of the international comedy industry does call me Papa. CJ's initials for my name, which you won't find out until you read my book. But I started doing my stand-up in London. And when I started doing comedy, I always wanted to project India in a very positive light. So I was the only Indian comedian in the UK. So most of my early material was always projecting India in a positive light. And I think subconsciously in my head, I thought to myself that अंग्रेजों को भी सोचना चाहिए कि उनका कोई बाप है. So I think that's where the name Papa CJ came along. And one of my earliest lines in the UK was that you shouldn't mess with us Indians because we come from the land of the Kama Sutra. We can screw you in more ways than you can count.
And you spoke about Kama Sutra. I mean, today, when a comedian cracks a joke and starts speaking something like this, and anybody can take offense. So how do you react to that? I mean, people are getting jailed for even not saying things that
When it comes to offense, that I mean, we can do a 2-hour conversation just on that. I think it's a very interesting space in that a lot of offense in my experience has to do with intent. Now, for somebody like myself, 99% of my work is live work. I rarely do anything online. So when I'm performing live, the people who are in that room understand the context, understand my persona, understand my intent. And so there's rarely any trouble. But if the same content was recorded and put on the internet, people who were not in that room will watch that and take it out of context and things go crazy. But I mean, so here's the thing, there are very many different ways of looking at it. One, I don't get into a lot of trouble because by and large, religion and politics are two areas that don't interest me a lot. So I don't talk about them a lot. My comedy tends to be more personal and about my experiences. Also, I believe that if you're not fully informed about a certain subject, it's best not to participate actively because at some point people are going to poke holes in your argument. But when it comes to offense, there are two perspectives, both from sort of comedian's point of view and a reality point of view. There are some comics. So, for example,
I can't hear you now. Papa,
can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Sorry, we lost you. Yeah.
Sorry. So, for example, I've been at shows where I have had a girl comic get on stage in the UK, pick on an 80-year-old couple and do stuff that I, as a comedian, found deeply insensitive and offensive. So I think when you're a comic on stage, you have two decisions to make. One, is my point of view something that is so fierce that I want to make that I'm happy to upset people who are in that room? Or for me, like if there's an 80-year-old couple in the front, I will not be insensitive towards them, no matter how funny it is for the rest of the room. So it is not that important for me to make a specific point or crack a specific joke if I know it's going to upset people. The setting also makes a difference. If you have come, paid tickets, and come for a public show, you have come to my environment. I'm going to do what I want to do. If I'm doing a corporate show, if I'm doing a private event, it is my duty as a professional to respect the guidelines and the boundaries of the space that I'm in. I mean, why would you invite me into your house to insult your guests? I can't tell you how many times it's happened in India. So a lot of the work I do are corporate shows. An agency will call, they will negotiate, they will decide, no, we don't want to hire you. They will hire a 25-year-old comic who will go and do this gig. Now, I'm not saying 25-year-old comics aren't talented. They're very talented. But by and large, they learn their art form doing open mic nights in small pubs where the average audience is a 25-year-old male. So the nature of the content they do doesn't work for a corporate gig where the average age is 45. Suddenly you get on stage and you start doing jokes about masturbation. And firstly, the event manager is deeply embarrassed. The client doesn't know where to look. You get pulled off stage halfway. And the client is not saying, I will not hire him again. The client is saying, I will never hire a comedian again, because that is what stand-up comedy is. The other side is, I think we can talk till kingdom come about how things should be, but we also have to accept how things are. So if you look at Charlie Hebdo, for example, was it right that it happened? You can debate that for 2 hours. This is how it should be. This is how it shouldn't be. But are any of us surprised? No. Because if you do certain kind of comedy or content, there will be people who will show up with sticks outside your house. So you have to take a decision as a professional whether you making that point is more important to you or whether your personal safety is important to you. For me, I mean, I'm not that hardcore, when it comes to making a point. I'm there to make people happy, to give them a good time. It's all fun and games. And I disagree with this point of view that, comedians should stand for this or stand for that. To each their own, For me, I go into hospitals and do free shows for patients. That's my way of sort of bringing happiness or bringing change. So I don't think it is right for other people to tell artists in any field how they should conduct their art form. Sorry, like I told you before this interview, I tend to ramble. So if I'm going off topic anywhere, just let me know. There's too many ideas coming at the same time.
That's fine. That's fine. I'm trying to switch, and I don't know. Today I'm not getting it right, but I will. So I understand. But my question to you is, I understand. I mean, each artist to its own, and nobody can tell how one should behave.
Yeah.
You traveled, and you probably been one of those Indian stand-up comedians who's performed in so many countries, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and so tell me, which is the country you found where you felt you could really express yourself freely?
I found the UK was fantastic. I mean, I'm a little biased towards the UK because I started my craft there. My first 700 shows were in and around London. And I find in the UK, you can talk about almost anything except race, because the British carry a lot of what I call colonial baggage. I have had somebody come to me after the show and say, you can't talk in an Indian accent because that's racist. And I was like, but dude, I am Indian. And he says, I didn't realize that. I said, why not? He said, because your English is pretty good for an Indian. I said, now that, my friend, is racist. So
True.
The English carry a lot of colonial baggage. You can't do an accent. Whereas it was a bit new for me. I remember as kids, we used to watch Mind Your Language. Do you remember Mind Your Language?
Of course.
And we used to laugh our heads off. And we didn't realize that it is racist. I went to the UK and people were like, oh, that's racist. I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I think it's also because as Indians, we grow around with so many different communities. And we're constantly making fun of each other, whether it's Bengalis, Gujaratis, Marwadis, And I went to a boarding school where we had people from everywhere. So we weren't really sensitized towards all of this.
No, no, you say that. I mean, Mind Your Language, I know, was one of the most popular shows in India at that moment.
Exactly.
And yeah, when we never thought of it. It's only in hindsight today when you sit and look at it, you say, yeah, it was a racist show.
Yeah. In fact, I remember this bit where he's Mr. Brown, right? Mr. Brown was
Yeah.
talking to that Spanish guy, and he said, what do you call multiple cows? So he says a lot of cows. So he says, no, herd of cows. And that guy says, of course I herd of cows. He says, no, no, no. A lot of cows is a herd of cows. He says, no, now you're talking bull.
Did you perform in the US?
I did perform in the US, yes. I've done a few cities. I did my show Naked on Broadway. I've done Miami. I've done a few different cities. I did. How can I forget? I did Last Comic Standing, which was this massive sort of reality TV show, and there were 3,000 contestants, and we did a few different rounds. I got to the top 10. Then we got into this house, and I still remember this American comedian saying, he's like, "Oh my God, dude! Like 10 million people watch this program." I was like, "Boss, I come from India. If I open my bathroom window, 10 million people will show up live." In fact,
So yeah. No, please continue.
sorry,
Please. Sorry, you
I
were saying
said,
something.
I said, I used to do a joke about reality shows saying,
Yeah, I heard that.
I'm not a fan of them, but got caught into it when I was in London. And that whole Big Brother thing happened with Shilpa Shetty. And people kept asking me, as an Indian, what do you think? And I said, boss, in India, 1 billion people know that Shilpa is going to win, which she did. Because if you think about it, how do you win that show? Maximum number of votes. How do
Yeah.
you vote? You call in. Who the hell do you think is answering those phone calls?
So the day an Indian leader or anybody decides that he wants to be the number one, get the maximum number of votes, it isn't very difficult, right? You just have to you just have to make sure that the population votes for you.
Well, I'm sure they'll have their IT cells who can sort that out.
So tell me, I mean, you have a lot of influence from the UK. So you were born there, you studied there. What is it?
So I studied there. My background was dad was a tea planter, worked for one tea company for 35 years. I took a loan and standard middle class ambitions, do a good degree, get a good job. So I went to Oxford University to do my master's in business. So did an MBA, took a consulting job in London, worked there for 3 years, hated it. Uh, and then after I had paid back my loans, I took a sabbatical and I went to the Edinburgh Festival. And I saw these guys doing stand-up comedy. And it was amazing. I was like, here's a guy on stage with a beer in one hand and a microphone in the other. And he was just having fun. And that was his job. And I just thought, boss, this is amazing. I've got to do this. So that's when I started. I mean, 3 months later, I was on stage and ended up doing about 700 gigs in the first 3 years. Of course, after the first year of doing pure stand up, I went broke. So I joined a recruitment firm. I used to work in the day, perform at night. And I still remember the level of hustling one had to do. Nowadays you go to these restaurants and you can drop a business card, and one person gets a free meal kind of thing. That's how they build their database. I used to go to these restaurants in London when nobody was looking. I would steal those business cards and then cold call these guys the next day from the office, place them in jobs, and get a commission.
Wow. So I mean that part of you. So how? I mean, you said you went broke after doing so many shows. So why
Yeah.
is it? It wasn't lucrative. I mean, it wasn't paying you.
Well, it's still not really a lucrative industry. I mean, when you start doing stand up in London, so a professional comic at a comedy club does a 20-minute set. As an open micer, when you start, you do 5 minutes and you don't get paid for them at all. Now, if you do an open mic in London, I mean, today as a comedian in India, it's far easier to start out. If you wanted, in fact, I'm wearing the t-shirt of the Comedy Store. If you wanted a 5 minute slot at the Comedy Store in London as an open micer, there were 1,000 other comedians from across the UK who wanted that same 5 minute slot. So what you could start doing is doing shows outside London. So you would go with two other comics, the headliner and the opener. You would be the middle act. If you had a car, you would drive them. If you didn't, you would pay your share of petrol money, and you weren't getting paid for any of these gigs. But the upside was when you went to, say, a Guildford, which is a smaller town outside London, 300 people would show up. And so you got paid nothing, but you were paying for transport. But one of the real upsides of that was, I have spent over 2,000 hours in cars with other comedians who've been doing stand-up comedy for between 10 and 20 years. So on the way there, I would see how they would prepare their sets. I would tell them, please watch my set. Please give me feedback. That was comedy university right there. Especially when you go to a room and you struggle to get hold of that crowd, and suddenly you see the headliner come on straight after you, and he's absolutely destroying it. That's where your sort of learning and education comes from. So I think that was an invaluable experience. But of course, financially, zero.
So, you studied at Oxford and then you took up a consulting job, and I'm sure that you worked at a consulting firm, and I'm sure it paid you well. I know it's easy to say I went to Edinburgh Festival, I saw somebody holding a mic and a beer mug, but taking a decision like that, right, to quit your job and at a young age and decide that you're going to do comedy when you really don't know how it's going to pan out. How easy or difficult was it?
Not easy at all, Raj. I think it's very important to, nowadays it's fashionable to say follow your passion. But as they say, passion doesn't put food on the table. So while you have to feed the soul, you have to feed the stomach as well. At the time I made that jump, I had paid back my student loans. I had enough money in the bank to get me going for about a year. So I think it was a little, I won't say easier for me, but at no point was I ever taking money from anybody else. I was living within my means, and I was doing whatever side jobs I had to do to support the comedy. I may have been doing a day job for 8 hours a day and performing for 10 minutes every night. But in my head, I was a comedian, and the job was on the side. And then eventually it got to a point where I was able to sustain myself financially through stand-up.
So what is that point when you say, okay, now I can make this as a full-time career? How does it work?
When people start paying you, basically when people start paying you on a regular basis, when you find you can pay your bills doing only your art form. You see, the thing is, you love what you do, you get good at it, and then the money comes. But that gap between loving it and the money coming is indefinite, and you don't know when it will come. There are friends of mine who've been doing stand-up comedy for 20 years. Suddenly the lockdown comes and they're driving vans. I have a comedian friend in Australia, very talented. He is now driving a van because that's how things are right now.
So speaking about the lockdown, how has lockdown impacted you?
It's been quite interesting. Of course, there is no substitute for live shows, but I'm the kind of person who always tries to find the positive in any situation. Initially, when the lockdown started, I think most of us thought of it as a productivity contest. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do yoga, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to read. And then after 3 weeks, I'm exaggerating when I say 3 weeks. My waistline will show you that there's been no sit-ups that have been happening. Then you think, you know what, this is rubbish. It's going to get over soon. Until then, I'm just going to sit on the sofa and watch Netflix. But eventually, you find a rhythm and a balance. I think the real upside of the lockdown is it has forced me to adapt to the new environment. And what it has made me do is bring to fore all my skills. Initially, and I'll elaborate on this. Firstly, I'm surprised at how well online comedy has worked. All my life, I have gone around telling people that stand-up comedy is like sex. It's best enjoyed live, not in front of a screen. So if you're watching it on a screen, you're surfing comedy porn. But surprisingly, I have loved being a porn star, and it has worked wonderfully well. But the other thing it's forced me to do is, today my competition, if a corporate wants to hire me for a show, and 99% of my work is corporate, my competition is not another comedian. My competition is Netflix, right? Why should they have me on a screen when they can watch these very well produced specials? The answer to that is two things. One, you have to customize the content, which really adds value. And secondly, you have to be interactive. The other real upside of what it has forced me to do is to look back over my life at everything I have learned and bring all those skills together. Today, when a client comes to me uh, and they say, for example, corporate training, what corporate training do you do? I say, no, 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 no. You tell me what your problem is. What are the issues you're facing, and I'll find a solution for you. So I'll give you an example, Raj. I had an organization that came to me to do a 30-minute corporate show, a stand-up comedy performance. I asked them, what are you doing? They said, oh, we're doing a 4-day partner conference, which is happening online. I told them, do you realize how boring it's going to be for people to pay attention for 4 days in a row online? So they're like, yeah, yeah, what should we do? I said, why don't you let me host it? So they said, okay, let's do that. In order to host this conference, I spent at least 15 hours talking to their partners.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Talking
You
to their
gone mute again?
partners.
Yeah, okay,
So,
you're fine.
yeah. I spent at least 15 hours talking to their partners. I learned about their entire organization. I knew every presentation, every person. On the back of that, uh, because I understood the issues so much, they invited me to come and do corporate training for them, which I have ended up doing. Add to that, given the nature of my work, I meet, so most of my gigs are to C-level audiences. Now, whether it's a 16-year-old or a 70-year-old, I'm cracking the same dirty jokes with them. It's a very one-on-one rapport. And because you're a comedian, you have no ulterior motive from them. So you're never seen as a threat. So the relationship is a very pally sort of relationship. So I've been in thousands of situations where I know two people who can help each other out. And I say, listen, why don't you guys connect? So the same organization has now asked me to do business development for them. And I have helped them close just massive deals by just getting the right people in the room. So I think the real learning for me in with the lockdown is to not put yourself in a box. You're not just a comedian or an author or a coach or you're Rajs Nayak, I'm Papa CJ, And I don't think it's fair to necessarily fit yourself in a box, but to really think about how you can add value and help the other person in whatever way possible.
Interesting. I mean, because in your head, you always had stand-up comedian, and he goes and performs, either does live shows of his own and things like that. And it's an eye opener for me from when you told me that 99% of your business is from corporates. I mean, that's a big eye opener.
See, I don't have any fancy guys who manage me. Okay, one, I don't live in Bombay. I don't have management. When an agency calls me for an event, they will only. I also know when an agency has called me, they've called me because the client has specifically asked for me. Then also they'll call the client and say, no, no, he's not available, and they'll send the guy on whom they can make the largest margin. So I will tell you one more thing. In an entire year, Raj, maybe there is one show that I do through an agency. Everything else is direct client.
And yeah, I mean, I presume that it's word of mouth, and your website is there so people can reach you and things like that. So tell me more about your personal background. I mean, you went to Oxford, you studied. I got to know the comedy part. So tell me your personal life. I mean, you were born in Calcutta. That much I know.
Yes, I'm born in Calcutta, a wonderful city to grow up in. The return on investment on nostalgia is 100%, because you can go back there and nothing has ever changed. Time stands still in Calcutta. I joke that is where ambition goes to die. But beautiful city, wonderful people, very warm people. Uh, I think the greatest blessing in my life have been my parents. Uh, my dad is now 72. My mom is 67. Dad rides a Harley Davidson motorcycle. Between the two of them, in the last 15 years, they have trekked up to Everest Base Camp. They have climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. They have done Annapurna Base Camp. My mom has learned how to fly ultralight aircrafts. My dad has trekked up all the way to Mount Kailash and rafted down the Zanskar. So I think a large part of, I mean, not a large part, everything that I am today or hope to be is due to the mindset of the two people who were instrumental in raising me. I we shared a common friend in Leander Pace, and
Yeah.
we used to, for a long time, we used to go to school together on a cycle. So the guy who used to work in his house, his name was Liaquat. So Leander used to sit at the back, and I used to sit in the front. And like his dad, Leander was always late. And I don't know if he still is, but and I still remember that I was a
Leander
kid.
won't like me telling this on a live chat, but
Huh.
I will not go into details, but we have a code for it. We call it the Leander Standard Time.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So what used to happen was the boys' school of La Marche near Calcutta had two gates. One was in front of the girls' school. So the cycle used to come and drop us there. Now I used to smile. I was a cute little kid, so the guard used to let me through. He always said no to Leander. By the time the guard could walk across to the other gate, Leander would run all the way around and get in.
Yeah.
So that's my
Yeah, but very interesting. You said your dad rides a Harley, and they've trekked all along. Your mother, you said that's something I caught on. Flies an ultra light aircraft.
yes. Yeah.
So what are their backgrounds? I mean, what's your mother's background?
So my mom is from Bombay. She actually grew up in a reasonably conservative family. She's one of seven siblings. So clearly, my grandfather didn't have television at home, uh, and he was quite and he was quite an active man. So my mom was the youngest of seven siblings, six sisters and a brother. And everybody else in her family, the other five sisters, all married into sort of business families. She was the only one who married my dad, who was a serviceman. And my dad's side, my grandfather used to be in the civil service. So he lived in many different parts, and I think his greatest asset was that he was in love with animals, and he had every single kind of pet you could think of. He had dogs, he had deer, he had white mice. In Lucknow, once he was given a leopard cub. He had a baby squirrel that used to live in his pocket. So he was this little Dr. Doolittle sort of fellow. And then he married my mother and took her to the tea gardens in the middle of a jungle. And she was like, "Boss, I'm having none of this." In fact, a very funny thing happened. So my mom grew up in a house where nobody drank alcohol. Suddenly she goes to Assam in the middle of these gardens, and tea planters drink themselves silly. So my mom was like, "No, no, we can't have alcohol served in the house." Fine. So, new bride has come and all. So she used to make all this fancy punch. So the first time all people came, this, "Oh, very nice, very nice." After that, people stopped coming. Right? Saying, "Who's going to go to the house? Daru milta nahi hai." Anyway, then they used to get called to other people's houses. Then my mom told my dad, "Listen, if you don't serve alcohol, you can't drink." So then my dad used to go and have juice in these places. Now, in the meanwhile, people kept asking my mom, "Have a drink. Why don't you have something?" So just to, ward them off, she started holding a glass and putting vodka in it. Now, glass pakarte pakarte, she started drinking. So by the end of it, my dad was drinking juice and my mom was drinking vodka.
So where did this flying come from? And it was just
Oh,
a
the
passion.
flying. Actually, my mom is just an adventurous person. She just likes trying different things. I mean, 2019, at the age of 65, she'll kill me for saying she's 65. She went alone to South Africa for a month just to live and experience the place, which I thought was phenomenal. You know, of course, 2 weeks later, I flew there and fixed up some shows in Joburg and Cape Town. But she just spent 1 month in Cape Town on her own, took a co-working space, went and joined a little community there, and just checked it out.
How interesting. I mean, it sounds very exotic. I mean, that's the life I would like to do. Just travel, go somewhere, just be there, stay for a month, and come back. Hopefully, I mean, I don't know when we are going to travel now, the way things are. So that's nice. I mean, and where did you study? I mean, in Calcutta. I mean, from there, where did you go? You said you went to boarding school.
I went to boarding school. In fact, I should tell you one or two stories from my childhood. When you asked about my mom, when I was I think about 6 years old, we had a teacher called Ma'am John who was very strict. So she summoned my mother to school. And my mother does not like being summoned. So mom goes in and I'm there next to her. And she says, yes. So Ma'am John says, your son has been using foul language. So she says, okay, what did he say? The teacher said, I said I was going to give a test on Monday. And he said, oh, shit. So my mother looked at this teacher straight in the eye. And she said, oh, shit, did he say that? So my, my mother was never summoned to school again. But eventually, I was sent to a boarding school in Himachal called the Lawrence School Sanar. Uh, the famous or infamous people from there are Sanjay Dutt and Pooja Bedi. And I loved it, yeah. I mean, we were on a 140-acre campus in the mountains with fresh air, clean water, 750 kids your age. And I think there were two basic rules. The one is that you never tell on your seniors, you never tattle to anybody.
Yeah, that's every boarding school. I mean, that's a given.
That's
Yeah.
yeah. And the second thing is that if you get caught doing something wrong, you will get a hammering. So either you learn how to take it, or you learn how to not get caught, or you don't do things. So I mean, we got slaps, we got hockey sticks on our backsides, we got squash rackets. Uh, but I mean, the stuff that we went through in today's day and age would be called child abuse. But for us, it was, I mean, everybody got it, so it kind of felt normal at that point.
You know, when I think about this, and I went to a boarding school as well, so I sometimes wonder, do these things still happen or things have changed?
No, they've changed completely. Yeah, you can't do any of this now. I mean, for us, the teachers would do it. Forget students. Where did you go to school, Raj? Which boarding school did you go to?
I went to a military school in Belgaum.
Ah, okay. Yeah. So, in fact, my school was also initially called the Lawrence Royal Military Asylum.
Yeah, and this was called the King George Royal Indian Military School.
Okay.
Initially, so, yeah. That's what it is.
Even we had a long tradition of a lot of service children coming to school.
Yeah. So, did you, I mean, when you were growing up, obviously, and what did you want to become? I mean, what you've become is different, probably much richer than what you thought. But what did you want to become? I mean, everybody had something, right? I want to become X, Y, Z. What did you want to become?
I think if I look back as a kid, I think as a 6 or 7-year-old, I probably wanted to be an actor. I mean, I used to think Amitabh Bachchan was, my heroes as a really young kid were Amitabh Bachchan and Kapil Dev. So those were, and at some point it was in my head that I wanted to go to Harvard. So those were the three things in my head. Nobody as a young kid thinks, okay, I want to grow up and become a management consultant. I don't think you'll hear that from a 5-year-old.
Yeah, but you became an actor. I mean, you, for all practical purpose, a comedian is also an actor, right?
Actually, I don't think a comedian is an actor at all.
Okay.
It's quite the opposite. So, I mean, the first line in my book is that stand-up comedy is an outward expression of an inward journey. So what happens is that when you start doing stand-up, you want the confidence that you can make people laugh. So you'll go for the easy joke. So the kind of joke I would do is that, as somebody who lives in Delhi, I don't understand the language you speak in Mumbai. We call it bread, you call it pav. We call it pyaz, you call it kanda. We call it a servant quarter, you call it a 2 BHK. So easy joke, guaranteed laugh. Then we do observational comedy. That stays all the way through. So a sample joke of that is that I remember doing driving lessons in London. And this instructor asks me, he says, oh, you Indians, why don't you drive in a straight line? I said, listen, I'm from Calcutta. In England, you drive on the left of the road. In Calcutta, we drive on what is left of the road. So that's another one. Then we tend to, because we want to feel popular, you'll bash the normal people that are popular to bash. So nowadays, it's very popular to do Rahul Gandhi jokes. The kind of joke I would do is that I was in Singapore and I remember reading the paper, and the front page of the newspaper, it said there was a pig on the street. So if there is a pig on the street in Singapore, that becomes headline news. In Germany, it became a sausage. in America, it became the president of the United States of America. So again, very popular to bash Trump nowadays. So that
You know,
then what?
you said something very interesting. You said nowadays it's very popular to do Rahul Gandhi jokes, and
Yeah,
on the other end you said Trump bashing. I mean, uh, how do you decide what is popular? Is it because
audience
somebody?
response.
Okay,
Audience response. In fact, for all the jokes that we do, uh,
but would you have ever tried of making a joke of a powerful leader? I mean, or wouldn't you even try?
I think everybody's tried them.
Okay.
Everybody's tried them. Uh, but you try them in safe spaces.
No, because
It's
I was
like,
just trying to see the context of popular. So I was just trying to understand. Yeah, fair
yeah,
enough. Because
yeah,
when you refer to the US, then you mentioned Trump. That's
yeah.
why.
So in
Okay.
fact, then what would happen is the next stage is you want to be seen as an edgy comedian, right? So you will use bad language, you will pick on positions of authority, you will do jokes that make you look intelligent. So, for example, there's a joke that I do about couple of them. So I went to the US under the Trump administration. I had a beard. This officer looks at my passport, looks at my beard. He says, "You know what? You Indians, you're a mistake. In fact, India is a mistake." And I said, "Come on, officer. As an American, you should be grateful to us." He said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because when Christopher Columbus discovered America, he was looking for India. So, to be perfectly honest, you are the bloody mistake." So, with that, now somebody is listening and thinking, "Oh, yeah, you know." Then I do a
Yeah.
joke about presidents, and I said, "Give me a cheer if you think that Pranab Mukherjee is a good president." Some of them cheer. Then I say, "Okay, give me a cheer if you think that Abdul Kalam was the coolest president ever," and everyone cheers. And I say, "I think so too, but I'll tell you why. Because he was president of India the same time that George Bush was the president of the United States of America. So he could have walked into the US, gone up to anyone, and said, 'You know what? Your president, he's a dumbass.' If anyone turned around and said, 'Who do you think you are? Rocket scientist?' So the beauty of that joke is there's a pause and then they get it. They're like, 'Oh, yeah, he was a rocket scientist.' But so these are the various stages of evolution. But eventually you've got to go inwards because we operate in a profession that has no boundaries, no guidelines, no social norms. So you've got to ask yourself, what are the things that I want to talk about? What are the things that I value? So the journey is a journey towards authenticity. So you're not an actor at all. You're trying to be as honest to yourself as possible. They say it takes you 10 years to find your voice in comedy. So what happens is we tend to experiment with different things, and you may try improv, you may try stand up, you may try working on a different subject, and the only way to know where the line is, not just for the audience but for yourself, is to cross it. And the beauty is that each time you cross that line goes just a little bit further. So you keep reaching out in these different artistic spaces until this kind of amoeba shape forms, which is your voice. I don't know if that makes any sense. I'm trying to
No, no,
describe it in the way
complete
it
sense. And
feels in
thank
my
you
head.
for clarifying. And thank you for clarifying, because you put things in perspective for me. Because in my head, it was again, a comedian stands up there and he cracks jokes and he has to uh, act in a certain manner. But now you clarified it for me, so it's good. So tell me about Naked.
You want me to take that shirt off? Is that what you're asking, Raj? I mean, come on, you start this interview calling me Papa, then you want me naked. I mean, so
In fact, I was actually, when I was putting out the tweet, wanting to say who you are. I want to say the man who doesn't is not scared to be naked on stage.
yeah, I know why you didn't tweet that, Raj, because then nobody would come to watch this. So, naked, are you talking about the book or the show?
Tell me about the show.
So, the show, I still remember the morning. I was sitting at home having chai in the morning, and the last line of that show came to me. And I just sat there thinking, there needs to be a show around this. So the whole show was built around I need to build a story that gets people here. And Naked for me was so. I have a very good friend called Reg D. Hunter. He's a fabulous comic based out of the US. I think he's been doing between US and UK, been doing comedy maybe 25, 30 years. And he says there is a difference between a comic and a comedian. A comic says funny things, whereas a comedian has something to say. So for me,
Interesting. Very interesting.
and there's nothing wrong with being either. For the
Yeah.
first 10 years of my career, I was a comic. I was doing jokes. Here's a joke, here's a joke, here's a joke, here's a joke. I think Naked made me a comedian because there was more to it. I remember the first time I tried out that show. It was at Akshara Theatre in Delhi. It was 2.5 hours long, Raj. And there was one bit in it which was about 20 minutes long with no laughs. It was very serious. And I had people coming to me, comedian friends, saying, "What's wrong with you, dude? How can you do that? There are people crying. This is a comedy show." And I did not listen to them. And the reason Naked is, well, got the kind of response I think it got is because of those serious bits. You know, essentially what it is I'm using the vehicle of my life to talk about the human experience. So and metaphorically speaking, uh, as human beings, we build walls around ourselves, which hide our deepest hopes and fears and desires. And over the course of that show, one brick at a time, I'm removing those walls. And while I do that, you haven't seen the show yet, you will. Symbolically, I remove a piece of clothing as well. But at the end of it, while you are completely naked, you are completely free. And what worked really well in that show is when an audience member is watching that show, they're not thinking, "Oh, this guy's talking about his life." They're thinking, "He's talking about my life. I have been through this. I have felt these emotions." I can't tell you, Raj, how many people have contacted me afterwards and said, "You know what? If you can go through this and come out smiling and laughing, you have allowed me to look at my life and my problems through a different lens." And it was the first time in my life that I felt that kind of a connection with an audience. And that was extremely rewarding for me. So that's, again, I've rambled about different things around it. But yeah.
No, interesting. The learning for me actually, comic and comedian. I mean that's
Also,
so.
I don't think, coming to that earlier bit we spoke about, I don't think you should put yourself in a box just because you're a comedian or a comic or whatever you choose to call
You
yourself.
can't either. It could be. You could do both.
People come into a room with you for an hour. They need to leave happier or richer or more feeling better about themselves or enriched after that hour or hour and a half. What you decide to do in it is up to you. You want to do poetry, you want to sing, you want to do stand up. You don't need to fit in, you know, innovate. Just be you, whatever that is.
Yeah, but it all depends on the proposition, right? I mean, what the person's told you. I mean, if you told that you're coming for a concert, then people are expecting that fare.
Well, there's two sides to it. With Naked, what happened was 99.5% of people liked the fact that they didn't expect that element of seriousness and poetry and things like that. But there was that 0.5% which is like, "But bro, I thought this was a comedy show, yeah." Right? So, which is fair. But I think sometimes that element of surprise works to your advantage, where you're giving them something they don't expect.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously, you didn't promote it as a comedy show. You just promoted it as Naked, right?
Yeah.
Or you promoted and they
I,
came
pro-
with the expectation of comedy because of the perception they carried about you.
I have to tell you this. I remember doing a fundraiser for the Nepal earthquake once. I was doing a show at Park Hotel, and they put an ad for this show in a Hindi newspaper. Raj, can you imagine what that ad read? It says,
Nanga.
it said, "Papa CJ Nanga, आज रात Park Hotel में 9 बजे 500 रुपए की ticket."
Houseful bhi hua hoga.
It was pretty full actually, but I don't think anyone came after reading the Hindi ad.
But out of curiosity, what is the TG that usually comes for your shows?
So my TG, what I love about it is that it is very varied. It's from age 16 to age 86 to 90, you know. And I love having that mix in the room because I'm also a very interactive comic. So I love being able to play the different generations against each other and engage in those conversations.
So tell me about your happiness project, because I've read about your happiness project. I'm quite interested, especially because I've ventured into trying to do something in that space.
So the happiness project, Raj, it started when I lost a massive contract for a whole set of shows with a large corporate client. And at that point, I found that it wasn't uh, the loss of that income that was bothering me as much as the fact that I wasn't able to go and do those shows for audiences that really wanted me to come. And then it occurred to me that if the loss of income isn't doing so much damage to, you know, my mental state, why am I not doing shows for people who need that income? So I remember in the first year, I organized a fundraising tour. I did 7 shows in 6 cities within 2 weeks, and we raised about 45 lakhs for 10 different charities, all from charities that work with women, children, animals. Then the next year, I decided that I would, this was pre COVID, that if you had a family member who had been unwell for a long time, I would come to your home, I would come to your hospital room, and I would just perform for them for free. I would do laughter yoga, I would teach them how to do that amongst themselves, and I would do stand up. So I've performed in hospital waiting rooms, I've performed for 2 people in a room, I have performed uh, in a bedroom with 6 people with a lady 80 plus who has a leg amputated and goes for dialysis 3 times a week. And I still remember after that show, I told that lady that I said, Auntie, मैंने आपसे झूठ बोला. This show is not for free. The payment is every morning I need to receive a laughing photograph of yours. 3 days later, her son sends me a message saying, CJ, you have increased her lifespan. Now, when I take her photograph to send it to you, she wants to look at it first to make sure she's looking nice.
Oh,
So
how
that
nice. How cute. Yeah.
so that was very gratifying. Then
Yeah.
I think November 2019, I put something else out saying that, you know, if you're, I'm not a qualified therapist, but if you need somebody to talk to and just want somebody to listen, uh, you know, write into me. If I'm in your city, I will meet you at the airport at a coffee shop. I will buy the coffee. Just come and, you know, you're welcome to come and talk. So it's not, I don't have a long term fixed project plan, but I just like doing different things in whatever capacity I can do,
To
which
spread.
I believe that my mission is in life is to uplift people and help them be the best versions of themselves. So that manifests itself in my comedy, in my laughter yoga, in my happiness project, in the motivational speaking and the coaching stuff. And it gives me great joy to be able to uplift people, you know.
Yeah. And you bring a lot of happiness to other people's lives. So tell me, what is it that makes you happy?
What does it makes me happy? Um, oh, everything. Yeah, a good cup of coffee, India winning that test series in Australia. I'm very easy to please, Raj. I don't have I'm a reasonably simple person. I mean, I go shopping once in 2 years. I find a shirt that fits. I pick up 5 colors. I'm done. Uh, Good food. Oh my God, I had the best lunch today. I love a decent meal. So I'm quite easy to please. So
What kind
I
of
don't.
food do you like? What kind of food do you like? You said I had the best lunch today. So what kind of food do you like? What's the
So
cuisine? That's your favorite cuisine?
So today I had some really good salmon nigiri, uh,
Wow.
which is outstanding. But normally I love home food. It's very boring, but uh, under normal circumstances I travel a lot. So ghar ki dal roti sabzi is I'm a happy camper.
And you did mention that you had an ambition for acting, though. Would you ever consider acting? I mean, if you get an offer,
I
somebody
say
who's
I,
watching,
s-
or
I
somebody who's
say
watching right now.
I say no to nothing, Raj. I am open to trying anything. The only thing is, I want to work with nice people who are honest and authentic, and I'm open to trying absolutely anything. Yeah. Why would I say no to it? Sure. If it's fun, if it's interesting, yeah. But I'm not driven by the glamour of it. In fact, I have to say that even with my profession, The two things I dislike about it uh, is number one is self promotion. I don't have management in this country, so I've got to pimp out all this stuff myself. And the second thing is the nature of the profession means that you have to be in a spotlight. But the fame element of it is I'm quite happy to be in a corner and not be noticed. In fact, if I go to a place where people don't know what I do and they ask me what I do, I'll tell them I'm an accountant, because then I get to hear about them and learn about what they're doing and what they do, and that deeply interests me. But if you say you're a comedian, then generally conversations tend to revolve around that.
Got it. And so we got very little time. So tell me about your book, because I know it's progressed from your show into the book. So a little more about it for people who haven't read it.
It's an ego trip, yeah, Raj. It's an ego trip. Why would you write a book? Who writes a book? Either you've got a story inside you that you're dying to tell, right? I tell my stories on stage and I get instant gratification. कौन माथा मार के 6 महीने किताब लिखेगा, right? So I was not interested in writing it all. That book offer was lying on my table for 2 years. There's no money in publishing. You will know this. I mean, if you buy a 300 rupee book, I will get 30 rupees. So once you buy
You know, a
10
lot of
books,
people have asked me to write, and a lot of publishers have reached out to me to write a whole lot of things because of my journey that's been there, and my being there even in the business that I am in. I've been lucky
yeah,
to be right from how television evolved in this country,
yeah.
and like you said, उसमें पैसा नहीं.
No, पैसा तो है नहीं. But I'll tell you what does work in a book is that the nature of the medium allows you to give your audience a slightly richer experience, because you are able to add far more depth and far more layers into it. So with my book, firstly, since it's based on the show, a large chunk of it is straight out of the show. So it's got that stand up element to it. But it also has allowed me the freedom to give them those additional layers of storytelling, which are not there uh, in a stand-up show, because there you got to give them a punchline every 15 seconds. So and the other thing is, I'm not a very well-read comedian. I don't read a lot. So the book is written for for khotas like me, basically. If you don't read a lot, you'll still be able to read my book. I mean, if you've heard me talk for 5 minutes, it's like I'm sitting next to you at a bar and telling you stories. It's that simple. You'll finish it in 4 hours.
Great. So what next for Papa CJ?
You tell me, yeah. You just made me an offer to come and act somewhere and all, yeah.
I didn't make you an offer, but you never know, an offer may just come your way. But thank you, Papa. It was lovely speaking to you. I mean, I got to know more about stand-up comedy today than I ever did. I always had certain things, and you put a lot of things in perspective, and thank you for that. And your journey has been inspiring. I mean, from Calcutta to Oxford to consulting to becoming a comedian, and like you said, today following your passion sounds very thing, but you finally managed to find your calling, and you haven't restricted yourself to that. I mean, you're doing many things. Like, one of the things which I like about you is your attitudes of saying, I don't say no to anything. Everything is welcome, and I really like that. And it sh- it also defines your personality. And
Also, yeah, the one thing I would add, you mentioned that bit about learning about stand up, is that I think it's, as human beings, it's very important to treat other people as human beings, as individuals. We as a comic today, I do that for my audiences when I customize content. But each individual brings so many different things to the table. And when you mentioned that thing about stand up, I should have mentioned this at some point earlier. When you start, we get 5 minute sets, right? So you don't
yeah.
have the liberty to tell a 3 minute story with one punchline at the end, right? You've got to get in 20 punchlines. Raj, I can show you spreadsheets I have with jokes. I know which joke is rated A, B, and C. I know I have a 90-second routine about a beggar that has a punchline that has 13 punchlines. So it is a punchline every 6 seconds. You can literally map it as a consultant does. And you got to start strong, end strong, then go strong, weak, strong, weak. So the strong stuff carries the weak stuff. And it's that precise. So it can be a science and an art, and you can blend the two of them together as well. So there's so much that goes into it, which people often, they just, oh, he's a guy just standing and telling jokes.
Yeah. So now that you've been doing some shows during the pandemic on virtual comedy. I mean,
Lots
have
of
you
them.
tried it? Lots of
Lots of them. Yeah.
So I'm giving you 3 minutes.
3 minutes after. There's only one activity I can complete in 3 minutes, Raj.
Okay. So should I make it 5?
No, what subject
Okay.
would you like me to talk
No,
about?
no, no, no. I'm just saying. Suppose you had to entertain the audience who are watching it right now,
Yeah,
and you had to do a small virtual comedy. You take your
yeah,
time.
no problem.
Why don't you just entertain them, since they've come and listened to you and
Yeah,
taken the time off? They need to be entertained. So I give this last session, hand it over to you.
I'm happy to do it. I've got to say though, while I do enjoy doing this online, I miss the live stuff. The last live tour I did abroad was in Singapore, and the show I did was hosted by a Pakistani stand-up comedian. So this guy got on stage, warmed up the audience, and he invited me onto stage. In that second, I realized I had been a part of history. It was the first time I had seen a Pakistani invite an Indian to occupy a piece of land that he was occupying before. And I'll be honest, that gig, we had a very drunken night, finished at 5:30 in the morning. Next morning, I'm catching a flight to Kuala Lumpur. I get to the airport. In my hangover, I lost my boarding pass. I went to the woman at the counter. I said, I'm sorry, ma'am, I've lost my boarding pass. Can you give me a fresh one? She started shouting at me, how can you be so careless? How can you lose your boarding pass? I said, excuse me, you work for Malaysian Airlines. You lost an entire bloody plane, all right? Then from there, I went to I went to Seoul in Korea. Raj, have you been to Seoul? Have you been to Korea?
No, I haven't. I haven't been to Seoul.
Have you been to Japan?
Yeah, I have been to Japan.
So just like Japan, one of the most interesting things about Seoul are the toilets. Raj, the last time you went to Japan, how long did you go for?
Oh, I went for 2 weeks, and
Did you ever go to the toilet in those
you
2 weeks?
spoke about the toilets. Be assured of that.
Yeah, you saw, right? Because I went to Seoul and right next to the pot is a computer. And I thought to myself, boss, I've got to try this. Did you try it?
No, we didn't have a computer, but we were very enamored by the warm seat and all the buttons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's these buttons, and I press this button. This jet comes from the back and hits me right in the sweet spot. In that second, I thought to myself, South Korea should have declared war on North Korea. They should have sent a missile towards Kim Jong-un. Because if a toilet can find an asshole with such pinpoint accuracy.
Awesome.
Oh,
Yeah.
I've got to tell you this other bit. I have to say this, that, as a country, while we have a lot to do, I think there's many things to be proud of as well. Our movies are all over the globe. Our fashion is all over the globe. We had Formula One racing in India. Raj, are you a fan? Are you a fan of Formula One?
Yes, to a certain extent.
Did you like the race which happened in Delhi?
I haven't watched. In the last 2 years, I haven't been following.
I will tell you this, when the Formula One race happened in Delhi, I was deeply disappointed because this was Formula One racing in the Delhi region. I wanted to see Formula.
This was a couple of years back, right? Not recently.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yeah. I wanted to see Formula One racing Delhi style. In fact, forget that. I wanted to see a one-on-one race, Michael Schumacher versus Delhi driver. Imagine this race, Michael Schumacher in pole position in Formula One car. Number 2 position, call center driver from Gurgaon in Tavera. Lights are all red. Tavera has already rolled down the window and said, race karega. All the lights become yellow. Schumacher is waiting to go. This guy's already fucked off. This is Delhi boss. Nobody waits at a yellow light. Comes to the first turn. Road splits up into 2 parts. Pakka rasta and kacha rasta. Schumacher goes down the pakka rasta. Tavera goes down the kacha rasta. 2 minutes later, Michael Schumacher has to turn around and come back. Why has he turned around and come back? Because there's metro construction happening. Comes to the pit lane, finds there's no entry sign. Tavera goes straight through. While Schumacher is getting petrol poured, somebody selling him magazines. There are chindle dancing in the middle of the road. Meanwhile, Tavera goes to a girl, whistles, and comes back. Again, Schumacher catches up with him. Again, the road splits up into 2 parts. Pakka rasta and kacha rasta. This time, Schumacher goes down the kacha rasta. Last time, he got screwed when he went down the pakka rasta. Crosses the finishing line. He's like, yes, yes, I won. Get to the podium. Michael Schumacher disqualified. He says, Arre, but why? Sir, today is odd number day. You have even number plate. I was trying to speed up the delivery of that because I've noticed we have 59 minutes and 30 and 40 seconds.
Right, right. And that was really nice. And thank you so much. I just wanted to see because I couldn't relate to what virtual comedy would be because you said it's picking up and people are doing a lot of it. So this was a good sample. And thank you so much. I'm sure people who have watched it, and if they want some virtual comedy right now, they can reach out to you, Papa. And thank you so much for coming on this live chat. And to all our viewers, thank you so much for coming and watching. And this is a pastime for me. I enjoy doing this, interacting with different people, getting to know them. And it's like I said, it's a very candid chat. It's unstructured. There's nothing it's free flowing, and that's what makes it beautiful. That's what I guess. Papa, thank you so much.
Thank you, Raj. Thanks so much for having me. All the best.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.